Ready to turn your next vacation into an unforgettable adventure? Join us as we dive into our 2 week holiday escape to Mexico, starting with sun soaked beaches and jungle ziplining in Tulum, followed by Michelin-star tacos and world famous cocktails in the vibrant Mexico City. Plus, we'll reveal the flights and stays that we booked entirely on points. Whether you're craving insider travel tips, foodie hotspots, or hidden points and miles tips, this episode is packed with everything you need to revolutionize your next journey south of the border. Welcome to the Revolutionizing Your Journey podcast. I am your host, DeAndre Koch. Today I've got my lovely fiance and co host with me, Taryn Gisbert. And today we're taking you along for our amazing 2 week holiday break adventure in Mexico. First up is going to be our relaxing week in Tulum over Christmas, where we soaked up the sun, chilled on the beach, and even went ziplining through the jungle.
Yeah, and then we switched gears completely and headed to the heart of Mexico City for a week full of incredible food and drinks. We ate at several Michelin guide restaurants, including a taco stand that has a Michelin star, and we couldn't resist checking out three of the world's 50 best bars, including the number one bar in the world at the moment for 2024.
And the best part was that we booked our entire Mexico City stay and our flight back home completely on points. So, we're going to share exactly how we did it and break down the experiences that made this trip truly unforgettable.
All right, so we're going to start off with our week in Tulum, one of our most frequent places to go for its food, weather, beaches, vibrant community, all of the things. I mean, Tulum has it. In a lot of ways, it feels like Bali. It's kind of bohemian, green. They have scooters and bikes. I mean, they really do try to have a lot more of this sort of green spirit, as well as a lot of yoga and meditation. And it's overall a really great and diverse culture in Tulum. And if you're not familiar with where it is, it's about an hour and a half southwest of Cancun and 45 minutes from Playa del Carmen.
Yeah, so we paid cash to fly there like we typically do with, most of our domestic travel, Caribbean travel. We typically pay cash. So we don't really use points when we do that. We usually fly American. So because we both have a status, elite status with American Airlines, I try to pay cash as much as possible on American flights to both rack up the American miles, but also to maintain status because of course you don't get the loyalty points when on award flights. And so we stayed at an Airbnb, one that was hosted by Greenwood Tulum. If you've been following us for a while, you know that we did a giveaway stay at one of their Airbnbs last year in sponsorship or tandem with them. And here's a little footnote, we might be doing that again this year. And so we always stay at the same Airbnb. One thing I want to note is that, in case you didn't know, so this is a little bit of a tidbit in the points and mile space. So you actually can get Delta miles or British Airways Avios by going through their sites when you book an Airbnb. So if, let's say you have a family outing that you guys always do and you do a lake house or whatever it may be that you book Airbnbs for, and let's just say it costs you, I don't know, 5 grand for a week stay, you actually can go through Delta's website and then separately you can go through British Airways website, their link, and then book your Airbnb that way. It's the same Airbnb, same everything, but you'll actually get Delta Sky Miles and British Airways Avios, which in my opinion, British Airways Avios are way more valuable. You can move them between different airlines like with Qatar Airways and such. But that's actually a little points and miles trick that a lot of people don't know and can be really helpful when using Airbnb. And so Again, like I mentioned, we always use the same Airbnb or stay at the same Airbnb. We're going to link this one in the show notes just because it's got a great layout, a rooftop private pool. There's a larger rooftop pool as well. It's well furnished, 24/7 security, full gym, and it's a block from a taxi stand as well, and even has a grocery store downstairs. So we always pick the same one just because of its location, the convenience, a lot of good features. It's in a really, really nice brand new building and absolutely love staying there.
Yeah, it's in Aldea Zama. Did I say that right?
Mhm.
Uh-huh. And it's a really cool, like, a subdevelopment right between the main town and the hotel zone. So it's where also most of the beach clubs are. So you're kind of in that happy medium where you're not just like in pure tourist center as well as like up cost for town. It's about a 10-minute drive to the beaches. Jaguar National Park, we've passed it. I want to see the jaguars if they have them. I don't know. We haven't gone yet. Maybe next time. But I love the neighborhood because it feels very sort of I hate to use another New York reference because I'm showing like, my cards here, but I don't know, maybe like old school Greenwich where it has like that really cool coffee shop vibe. There's a lot of women and yoga and dogs, and it feels very cool, very safe, and very green. It actually gives me a little bit of like that Costa Rica vibe in Tulum specifically. When comparing it to Mexico, I don't think there's other places in Mexico that I've been that remind me of like that naturalist spirit of Costa Rica. So it's one of the things I love. We've got a beautiful like wine and cheese shop. We've got sushi. We've got everything in walking distance, like right from the Airbnb, including a amazing supermarket that is downstairs. So, I mean, you really can't beat the convenience of having like not just essentials, but like fresh fruits, vegetables, everything that you could need. They really do have right down there. And additionally, my new favorite thing when we were just there is they have a mezcal location that just basically is called Mamazul Tulum, and it's a mezcaleria, and they also have a location in New York for any New York listeners in New York City. And they have one of the biggest mezcal selections I've ever seen. And it was like the happiest I've ever been in terms of having a amazing mezcalita right down the street from where we were staying. Just take a little stroll and have an amazing experience as well as some really good tacos.
And we actually prefer to go the Airbnb route instead of the resorts in Tulum just because there's so much to do, so much to see, and so much in the surrounding area as well. This is a place where we absolutely don't want to be stuck at a resort all day. As you guys have followed the podcast, we like to be adventurous, especially when we do our trips to like when we went to Bali and Singapore. We were out, we were experiencing the livelihood that was there. So we rented a car with Avis thanks to our American Airlines status. We get President's Club with that. So rented a rental car right from the airport, which was super easy. And this was actually our first time flying into the new Tulum airport. And that just opened in like March of 2024. And what was amazing is before we've been going to Tulum for a number of years now, actually, we would have to fly into Cancun, which is Mexico's busiest airport, and then drive an hour and a half to Tulum. Now we fly into one of the like quietest, most chill airports I've seen that, especially for like when it comes to landing in another country. And then it's a 45-minute drive that's very, very easy to get to. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to enjoy the experience of the new airport as much because we did not receive our luggage. So we both checked the bag. And so we flew from Miami, and Miami only has one flight per day going to Tulum. And despite all of our efforts, I tried to have them route the baggage to Cancun, was willing to drive to Cancun to get it. Long story short, and this was also December, I think maybe 23rd ish, right? So it's the craziness of the holiday season. Our bags did not come until slightly more than 24 hours later because the flight incoming that had our bags actually was delayed a little bit as well, which was on Christmas Eve. Now, that's the beauty of having credit cards. We have travel insurance. If you don't know, airlines in these situations, they'll cover what they call reasonable toiletries, but their rules around that are super strict. But the credit cards will oftentimes cover a lot more, or reasonably more, I should say. So, Taryn, I think you'll like my terminology here. You can go out and buy the Bulgari cologne makeup kit, the Dolce and Gabbana, right? You can't show a $2,000 receipt for high end luxury toothpaste and expect them to cover it, but they will cover some reasonable expenses. But the claims process does take a while, so we're still getting sorted through that. Now, that being said, I did actually file a complaint with American Airlines directly, and they didn't respond to the complaint, but I just actually checked my AA points balance today and noticed that they deposited 7,500 American Airlines miles in my account based on that day, which was not there. So I think they just like, here's some miles, haven't responded to the complaint, but at the same time, I also understand that their way of responding to the complaint is through miles. So I think, Taryn, you probably had those as well. So what did you think about the airport overall?
I thought it was beautiful. I'm very bummed there's no lounge. They need to fix that because we need some kind of lounge. Centurion, Priority Pass, give us something. However, the food, the amenities, the layout, it was very on brand for Tulum. It felt very natural without being extra. I'm not sure I can explain it very well, but like even like the women's bathroom had like bamboo across the ceiling and it looked sort of like a Mayan temple. So it's like a really cool blend of things that are more modern as well as more natural. And I think that's something that Tulum does that's really cool. And they did have a lot of really good food options, even though they were not lounges. The food and drink options were very good, as well as the bathrooms as and everything else. So overall, I was impressed with the airport, and I'm surprised there weren't more people there.
Yeah, I mean, the customs was a breeze. We landed, used the bathroom, and there was pretty much only some of the people on our flight in front of us. Granted, with our status, we're usually closer up to the front of the plane. There wasn't a long line. Usually in Cancun, we've easily had to wait for, there's multiple planes landing at the same time. We had to wait for easily an hour, hour and a half to get through customs. Customs was a breeze. I would say under normal circumstances, baggage claim was a breeze because it would be a breeze because there was literally just one baggage thing going. The only thing I would say that I was a little bit more annoyed by was, so in Cancun, if you're used to flying in there, after you get your bags, you kind of walk through this hallway of vendors and everyone's trying to get your attention. They want you to get their timeshare presentation, all these different things, but it's a pretty wide hallway because the airport's so large. And then you go outside and everyone's yelling at you, trying to get your attention for a taxi. Well, here at this airport, the hallway they bring you through after a baggage claim is actually super, super narrow because it's much smaller. And you can't like get through or past baggage claim and like avoid anybody because literally there's just not that busy. So there's so many people that are waiting there just to say, hey, where are you going? What hotel are you staying at? I got a deal for you, X, Y, and Z. And I'm always annoyed at doing that. It's like, hey man, we already got a rental car. And like, oh, we got a better deal for you. We can, hey, we already have our place booked, all these different things. So we're very respectful. But the nice thing was is there wasn't a million people also trying to grab our attention for a taxi as well. And once you kind of get out of that area, it's very, very calm. There's a Starbucks, very chill. So I did like it. And it's very easy to get to and navigate to as well. So that's super cool. One thing I want to note, if you are thinking, if you've never been to Tulum, I hear oftentimes from friends like, oh yeah, I'm staying in Tulum. I booked X, Y, and Z resort. Just because the resort has the name Tulum in it doesn't always mean it's actually in the Tulum part that you want to be. For example, Dreams Tulum, which is a Hyatt property, is actually like 20 minutes away from the beach and the main Tulum area. It's just on the highway in the cut, basically. So just because the hotel or resort says Tulum in the name, pull up Google Maps and see where it actually is because it might not actually be in the town of Tulum or a part of the town that you want to be. But I know, Taryn, we go to Tulum often and we haven't actually ever talked about it on the show. Tulum's broken up into a few different places. I know you mentioned a lot of the things that you love. We actually had a chance to go to one of the beach clubs there that are super popular, Rosa Negra, which is actually a huge brand of resorts and beach clubs. What did you think? What do you like about the beach club area, the hotel zone? Like, what do you like about that part of Tulum? We'll kind of take it in a few different sections. So just the beach club for first.
Well, I have to say, I am a fan of day drinking. and the beach. So it encompasses two of my utmost favorite things. So I'm a huge fan of the beach clubs in Tulum, especially because they're also not as much of a detriment to the actual, natural habitat as some of the others are in other facilities where they have to kind of get rid of all the trees to make an area for that. So I love that it's natural. I love that it's right there on the beach. I love that it's a party vibe. It's like a club plus your resort vacation all in one. And I mean, we were at Christmas, right? At Rosa Negra, right?
Yeah, on Christmas Day. Yep.
Yeah, and it was great. I was surprised it wasn't more crowded, but I think it's because they had a little mistake in their Google, which said they were closed that day, and they were not closed that day. But we had amazing seats in the area. So, I mean, it didn't hurt us at all. And it was a great experience. The cocktails are great. The food is fantastic. You have a gorgeous beach right there. So, I mean, if that's your kind of vibe, like a party food, drinking, beach vibe, it's exactly what you should check out if you haven't already.
Yeah, so when you go to Tulum, just so you know, if you're trying to get to the beach, most of the beaches are privatized. You have to go pretty far to get to just kind of a general public beach that you can swim at. So what that means is that most of the beach are going to be beach clubs or resorts, and a good amount of them have some sort of minimum spend if you are going to be on the beach club part. So most of them are also restaurants. So if you just go to the restaurant, they'll say, "Hey, look, we'll seat you at the restaurant. There's no minimum spend." But if you want to be in the cabana, the Bali beds, whatever it may be, it's going to be $75 per person or $100 per person. The food was fantastic there, and we for the most part had some pretty good food. I know that the last time we were in Tulum, we went to, I think that restaurant was probably one of your highlights, right? Bagatelle, the French restaurant.
That was my favorite. Bagatelle was probably my favorite place in Tulum, but I love French food, so I'm definitely biased to this. There's excellent food that is not French in Mexico, everywhere in Mexico. I just really love the way they did the experience. It was very like club vibes, but also high-end cuisine, which is a really cool combination because you don't generally see that, especially if you follow the Michelin guide. A lot of these are a little bit more formal for the formal meal. So it's really nice to have like a really high end meal, but then have like that party vibe and lights and music afterwards. And they delivered on everything. And I think that's probably my favorite like party experience restaurant, with the restaurant being very good in Tulum to date.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, we did Rosa Negra as the beach club, but then at night they had Rosa Negra at the restaurant, the higher end dining restaurant. So one thing to know, if you're going to Tulum and you want to have a night out on the hotel zone, the strip basically. And when I say the strip, don't think of like the Vegas strip or Miami or Cancun strip. This is a dirt road. It's very rustic, very bohemian, but these places still know how to party. So these restaurants, you're going to want to book your reservations for sometime between 7:30 and 8:30, and you're going to want to do this in advance. So for some prime days, you're going to want to, definitely do a few days early, but definitely don't try last minute to say, "Oh, let's go to this place." At least by the morning of that day, see what restaurants have availability, but I would highly recommend at least a day or two in advance because most of these restaurants are super popular. But the reason why you're going to want to secure that 7:30 to 8:30 slot is because most of them have some sort of amount of time that you're allowed to stay. So usually around 90 minutes, depending on how busy they are. And most of them have a show of some sort that begins at 9. And so this year we did Ilios, which is a Greek restaurant. I would honestly say the food was okay. I was actually a little bit disappointed, seeing as how much I love pasta and Greek food. And that's probably, of all the restaurants I've been on the hotel zone, my least favorite of them. But they had a really cool fire show with fire spinners and other things like that. So that was their show. Rosa Negra, I just remember a DJ going, lights flickering. Taryn, you were spinning a napkin in the air.
The napkins, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember there was energy. Bagatelle was still, so a lot of these restaurants, they just kind of turn it up a notch at 9. It's not like the whole thing is just going that long or for the whole rest of your dinner, but it's like a nice 10-15 minute, just everyone having fun. And of course, you can go on with the rest of your night as well.
As a note, Real quick, when you're making reservations, if it is the busy season, you probably should do it way more ahead than just a day, like we were recommending, just because they can get very busy, especially during those peak times. So don't wait till the day before to make the reservation if you want to have this experience.
For sure. And just so you know, if the food and drinks in the hotel zone are the most expensive in the area of Tulum, but there is fantastic food in the main town and in the subdevelopment Aldea Zama that Taryn mentioned, where that Airbnb is that we stayed at. That's a whole subdevelopment with a bunch of restaurants in there. But in the main town, you can get amazing street tacos. We went to that smokehouse Siete Fuegos, which was incredible. I mean, we've had some really, really good food experiences that were not tied to the hotel zone. A hotel zone is going to be much more expensive. You're going to pay $30 or $40 for a taxi to get there if you're not staying there. It's an overall more expensive night. Very fun, but you can do a lot of things on the cheaper in the main town of Tulum. And so one of the things that we did different this time was we checked out one of their theme parks. So there's a few there. 10 years ago I did one. I went to one called Ishkaret, which is like they've got some underground rivers you can snorkel and some shows and those type of things. But this time we went to Explore, which is their zip line and adventure park, but at night it becomes Explore Fuego, which is kind of cool because actually there's like fire and all over the place and tiki torches. It's at night. And so, this was really different because, right, this was a completely different ticket. In fact, one of our guests that were on the show, he saw my stories from this. Tom Marsden saw our stories, and he messaged me the next day and it was like, "Oh, we were there from 9 to 5, but our tickets were from 5:30 to 11 with the Fuego ticket." And so, I personally liked going in the evening time, although there was not sun and it wasn't 100 degrees out. It was still in like the 80s, 75, 80s. That's a good way to avoid the crowds because a lot of times cruise ships coming into Cozumel and such, those crowds will go to the theme parks during the day. And so we had a not super crowded evening. There were some cool things about Explore. I really liked it. It was a fun theme park. Really, it's very different. What do you think, Taryn?
I love caves, and I love like being able to see natural caves in the way that they are. So it's really cool that so much of this entire theme park location is all built in these caverns, with these just beautiful fresh water. And I've done zip lining, I've done water slides, but I'm glad we started with the water slide because we did start in the evening when the sun was going down and it was still quite warm. So that was comfortable. The zip lines were freaking great, honestly.
They're awesome.
Like I love a zip line, but these were some of the coolest. The one thing I'd caution is that if you're doing it at night and it's not as warm or hot, which most likely you'll probably be at a time that it's warm. We were there when it was a bit chillier, and after I got a little cold, it made it a little harder. And most of the zip lines, the last zip line, you have to land in water. Spoiler, you can also say like I don't want to get wet and you can skip it, and it's because it's not even a fun one, honestly. It's just like going into a waterfall, which if it was 90 degrees outside and we had been there during the day, I was like I would have been all about this. But it was nighttime, we'd already been wet, and doing that at the end of the zip line twice, I was getting cold. Now I'm not normally the girl that gets cold, so that's just saying something.
Yeah, they had a bunch of different things you can do. They had that water slide, like you mentioned. It's like the world's first or only 5-in-1 like featured water slide, which was cool. The zip line had different routes you could do. There were some ones where you can go through fire. I mean, it was water as well. Those were super cool. We did pay for the photo package, which the photos came out really, really well, actually, where basically there's photo opportunities all through the park and they have a chip in your helmet that takes a picture as soon as you go by. So I thought it was worth it. It was like $50, and you don't get to pick one or two photos. It's just all the photos they take, you just get. And from a content standpoint, for years, I just love photos, and the pictures turned out really well.
I was gonna say, it's good that you did because we also thought we'd be able to use the 360 and other cameras that we have for other shots, but we were not actually able to use any of those on the majority of the rides. So if you were going to go, the only real way is either to have like the chest strap camera like you had, which I'll let you explain, or they had different head straps for GoPros, or most of the people, unfortunately, were doing like that sealed bag for your phone, which I don't trust because I get a little too nervous in those kind of locations to do that kind of gambling because all my things are there. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, like the chest strap was great, but at the end of the day, because it was nighttime, the shots didn't come out that well. I think the caverns when we were walking through there, those actually looked decently well. But during the day, I would go with the GoPro. We have the Ace Pro, but essentially the same does the same thing, right? So a chest strap or a head attachment as well, head strap attachment would work. They have a bunch of activities. We didn't do the river swim or the river raft because it was nighttime cold and we dove in cenotes. I don't need to really swim through one. And there's like a zip line and a hammock thing, which we didn't really feel the need to do after zip lining a ton. We did the off-roading, which I really liked. Taryn, I know you weren't a fan of because it was basically like driving a John Deere tractor over potholes.
I assumed a John Deere tractor would have much better hydraulics than that, to be fair.
And maybe ours was just broken also, but I enjoyed it because it was a nice. Yeah, I just I like driving off road, but it wasn't exactly four wheeling like ATV style. We were probably going at most like 15 to 20, maybe 20 miles per hour, but it is what it is. But they'd also include with the ticket though a full buffet, which actually wasn't a bad spread.
It was not terrible. It had a lot of vegetarian options, which were and the healthy corner, which was very popular. So much so that most of those were empty. They also had a really great grilled section, marrow bones, steaks. Then they had burgers, fries, things for the kids, things for you, salads, all the Mexican toppings to do all of the other things. I mean, the spread was pretty good. There is no alcohol on site. So that is something that if that is something you are planning in your excursion, you will not be able to find on this excursion. There is no alcohol on site.
So overall, our time in Tulum was fantastic. Had a really good time, despite our additional travel challenges. Still made the best of it, and still had a great week of Christmas. But then it was time to fly to Mexico City, which we were both excited for because neither of us had ever been to Mexico City. Heard a lot of good things, and Taryn is a huge foodie, and so it's one of the top-rated places in the world from a food standpoint. So we actually used points to fly from Tulum to Mexico City. So from the Tulum airport into Mexico City. Now, we didn't fly into the main Mexico City airport. We flew into Santa Lucia. They actually kind of have the New York thing like JFK and LaGuardia. So this is kind of like more like flying into their LaGuardia, which is a little bit more out. Well, in this case, this one's more outside the city. But this one, we use points. So we transferred points from Amex to Aeroplan. And what's interesting about that is Amex to Aeroplan is always a 1.6 point transfer. So basically, 9,000 Amex points equals 14,000 points on Aeroplan. And it's always that outside of maybe a transfer bonus to increase that to even better. So almost as good as 1 to 2. Now, one thing I was concerned about is when I was doing the searching, and for those of you that are newer to the points world, this is one thing you keep in mind to transfer points from one airline or from your credit card to an airline, that typically is instant most of the times. But there's some places where it's not instant. And the worst thing to do is you transfer points today. It takes them 48 hours. And when the points finally land, that flight is gone. Well, there's not a lot of risk when it's only 9,000 points per person versus you're trying to do a family of five and you have to do, and it's 20,000 points per person. But still, there's some concern there. So, although it said it took 48 hours to link to the Aeroplan website or your Aeroplan account, and then 48 hours to transfer, so possibly a 4-day gap in between, both of those were instant. So, I instantly was able to link my Aeroplan to Amex, and I instantly transferred my points from Amex to Aeroplan. Now, the more difficult part, honestly, was that the fact that the website was 100% in Spanish for awards bookings. That was a little bit annoying. Now, I do speak Spanish pretty fluently. My parents live in Panama, but still, I don't really do my day to day activity, especially points and miles in Spanish. So I still had to like make my browser change to English to make some things easier and make sure I was tracking with everything. But across the board, this would have been $550 in cash total for both of us. And in reality, we paid 18,000 Amex points and $70 cash per person. So we ended up having almost a 2.7 cent redemption. So it wasn't bad. It was a really, really smooth process. And our first time flying Aero Mexico as well, or Aeroplan as well. So it was great.
We got lucky from what I've heard, but just from what I've heard.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. DeAndre here, and I just wanted to interrupt briefly to remind you of two things. First, be sure to sign up for our newsletter where we give you direct access to travel updates, news you'll want to jump on in the points and miles world, and our continuously updated card offers to maximize your travel rewards, often before they're ever mentioned in the show. Also, if you didn't already know, we have a private Facebook group where we share news as it breaks, ideas, and other things that don't make it into the newsletter or show many times. And that's the best place to get your points and miles question answered directly by me and other travel enthusiasts. Both of these links will be in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so I did a lot of research before we went to Mexico City because I was very excited. I had a lot of things I wanted to accomplish, and it's a huge city, like huge. So, what I found in most of my travel groups and from most of the people that I know who've been there, some of the most walkable and like tourist friendly areas, which is not normally what we target, but it made sense here, were Condesa, Roma Sur, and Roma Norte, even El Centro. But most of them are touristy, but there's benefits to that because they also have things at the time that you need them. So I'm actually going to skip to that now. Know what the meal times are. That was something that I feel like we did more research on for Europe, and we had no assumptions about Mexico because we've been so many times. We didn't think Mexico City was going to be any different than, the rest of coastal Mexico. And we learned quite a lot. The meals are later. It's a lot more like Europe, like Spain. Lunch restaurants do not even open until 2 p.m. And most people do not have dinner until after 8 p.m. So if you're looking for breakfast or lunch, there are brunch locations that are open that do breakfast and lunch, but all the other restaurants are closed until 2 o'clock. And that's when the lunch restaurants open. So that's something that was actually very important and vital to the planning that I didn't know till we got there, but we figured it out. But it's something I definitely would want to make sure that any of our listeners who are going to Mexico City know when they're planning their reservations, plan it ahead of time, knowing that you're not going to be able to get lunch before 2 unless it's a cafe, and then even then you're probably going to have a later dinner, so you might want to plan to have a 2 o'clock lunch, 8 o'clock dinner, and then plan around that. But we ended up being able to walk around to everything because we stayed in Condesa, where we were at the Andas, which is there. And Condesa is a really great location. It's very walkable to Roma Sur, Roma Norte, and Condesa itself is just beautiful, very walkable, very great. Lots of dogs and parks is really cute area. So, I mean, we walked literally almost everywhere except for one little foodie spot that was on the very far north of the town. And that would have been a little too far to have walked, but it was a great experience overall.
Yeah, and then the other thing for that one that was out of town, which was the restaurant Nikos, that one we took an Uber for, and Ubers were super cheap. So to kind of compare, so the Uber or the taxi, we paid an actual taxi to take us from the Santa Lucia airport into Mexico City to Andas. That was about $50, which wasn't terrible. But our Ubers were like $3, $4, $5, $6 for the ones that we did take around town. And I think our Uber from the Andas to the Mexican International Airport was probably in the realm of like maybe $10. So Ubers there were way less expensive than you typically find, which was nice. The Andas, so we booked this for New Year's Eve week, and the hotel was 100% booked. We ended up booking this back into September. So to give you some perspective, right? So New Year's Eve, we booked back in September, and I had reached out in November, I believe, because I ended up finding out that I had some free night certificates from Hyatt. And I was like, oh, well, the free night certificate with Hyatt, you can use up to a category 4. The Andas Condesa is a category 4 hotel. And I just said, hey, can I actually swap out my booking or a couple of the nights with the free night certificates we have? And they reached out and said, "Hey, sorry, there's no more ward nights available. Basically, we can't do this without you losing your booking because we'd have to give up your booking in order to try doing this." So we didn't end up doing that. So we still have these free night certificates to use. But just to give you an idea, this hotel, beautiful property, category 4, only 15,000 Hyatt points per night. And for a couple of those nights we stayed, being New Year's Eve, were considered peak nights. So they're 18,000 points a night. And Hyatt, as many of you know, is a partner with Chase. And we very easily could transfer our points from Chase to Hyatt for this booking. And so the actual cash cost of this was almost $3,000, and we used 90,000 points, and we used a guest of honor benefit. And a guest of honor benefit I actually acquired ourselves just from our stays last year. And the guest of honor benefit is essentially where we get globalist benefits for up to 7 days. That's something that we won't be really needing this year because we have globalist now for this year, but we did not for at the time then. We were on the cusp of getting it. So I used it, but in hindsight, I probably won't use it again. The reason why I used it is because I was hoping for a suite upgrade. I knew we were going to get the free breakfast, and those were probably the two biggest things we would get over the Explorist side of things. And it was still a 3.2 cent redemption, which is still pretty good. However, the reason why I wouldn't use the guest of honor benefit like this is twofold. A, because it was New Year's Eve week, the hotel was 100% fully booked. Our upgrading to a suite was impossible. So we would have had to have used a suite upgrade certificate to guarantee that. The second piece is that we were in a foodie city, and we only had breakfast in the hotel maybe 3 of the 6 days or 7 days we could have stayed there. We could have breakfast there because we went out into town. We ate at cafes and all these different things. And so while yes, we could have saved money by having the hotel breakfast buffet, which was decent, we had some really, really good food just by walking and finding a couple places down the street, which Taryn is you're the one that researched all of them. There was a couple that we just kind of randomly found, like on was that New Year's morning when everything in the world was shut down and there was like one restaurant that we found.
Yeah, we got pretty lucky. That's why I emphasized earlier that you definitely need to check what's open. Google is not your friend. These hours are not accurate for those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, some of the places we found had spectacular breakfasts, including, cappuccino, papaya, eggs, everything for like $16 total. So, I mean, I'm not sure it was worth the expenditure.
Right. And so again, a free breakfast is always nice, but we had some really good food. I mean, we had incredible food almost everywhere we went, but I probably wouldn't use that again in another like food area. So if we were in like a Paris, or if we were in, Italy, probably wouldn't worry so much about the free breakfast as much.
I think it depends on the timing too. I think it was more about the timing of the meals, where it was like if you didn't do that, then like you have to figure something else out. So, knowing like the timing of what's a standard for a meal, are you going to have restaurants available? Because when we say like we were looking for a lunch spot before 2, like you could go down several very what they would say busy blocks coming from New York. They didn't look as busy, but I feel like they have more of a rotation of busyness in Mexico City, and they just have a different kind of schedule. But like it would seem like more than half the restaurants in the entire area would be closed, and that's because of timing. So it is important to have an understanding of the timing for that before you schedule a lot of things.
Before we talk about the experience out in Mexico City, what do you think of the Andas overall?
I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. It was in a great location, and it had some really cool like green space courtyard areas. I loved the roof top, which was for bringing your dogs, and it had games for adults. It had indoor outdoor. It was a full bar restaurant. One of the coolest places that I wish Loki was there for. Honestly, that's all I thought about. I was like, I wish I could have brought my dog here. He'd behave terribly, but he'd love it. But it was a really cool vibe. It was a little confusing to get around because it was like ground floor, where are we? No, wait, not ground floor.
Yeah, the layout was a little interesting, and how, because there's like two hotels combined in one area with shared space. It was a little different for sure.
Hmm.
And then we did so I was planning for so long trying to figure out what we were going to do New Year's Eve. I knew in Mexico City New Year's Eve, a lot of what I saw was kind of like a New York where it's like Times Square, be out in the crowds, there's a lot going on. And we decided that we didn't want to do that and found out that the Andaz was actually hosting a party on their rooftop. And now the Andaz is 17 stories tall. And so their rooftop actually over has a really beautiful view. That's where the pool is also. There's a restaurant there, pool, and a really beautiful view of the skyline. And so I was expecting their New Year's Eve party to be pretty amazing. And it started out like it was going to be pretty cool. The view was amazing. That was the only time we ever went up there was for this. The view was amazing. Food was decent, but then it was killed by pretty not great drinks, and the DJ was not good at all. Now, without going into too much detail, I'll say this: have you ever been to a New Year's Eve party where there was no New Year's Eve countdown? And so no one actually knew when New Year's happened because the DJ never made an announcement. And for those of you that know me, know like music, know DJing is something that I've actually done for years. I was quite underwhelmed.
And he was mad because he's like, I could have done this for everyone.
I could have and I've done that before. You know, we've been to parties where I've grabbed the mic and hyped the whole crowd up.
I know. That's why it's funny. You're like, I'll do it. I'll be the MC. I'll hype it up. So I know that that's what hurt you more is that not the fact that it didn't happen, but like, you're like, I could have fixed this. I could have made it better.
I was like, for sure the DJ made no announcements all night. I was like, for sure they'll at least do the countdown.
No.
And I wanted to see the view from the rooftop side, which was not where the DJ was. And anyway, yeah.
And we were all trying to eat our grapes, not knowing exactly when the clock struck 12. So, if you know anything about these traditions, it's a bit challenging to do that under a minute when you don't know when the minute starts. So, even from like a non American standpoint of like the, countdown, there are other traditions that are very much ingrained in that community. It didn't feel like they observed or like they gave us the grapes, but they didn't give us like a time to start, which was very weird to me that you would kind of go that route, provide these things, but then not let people know when it's time. I don't like when people are too mouthy telling me about it's almost time. It's almost time, to be fair. I know we might disagree on that. I don't want too many reminders from the MC DJ. I just, I want to hear more music, but I was very remiss not to have heard like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like anything.
Yeah, and there was zero countdown, zero like we're going into the new year, zero like kiss your sweetie now, nothing. And I mean, the food was decent is the nicest thing I could say.
That was probably the only like not great food we actually had in our entire Mexico City.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, and it was probably on the higher end of expense when we look at what we paid
Right. Yeah.
because a lot of our really good meals were so cheap. Not all of them, some of them were still in like a moderate price range, but they weren't at the high end for the most part. And they only had like grapefruits. We were like, "Oh, could we get this with lime or lemon?" They're like, "We only have grapefruit." We're like,
For cocktails, right.
yeah. So I don't know if it does seem that Mexico City does operate on a very seasonality type of menu, which is why, like, one of the things I wanted, which is like a chili dish that's very popular, but in the spring, it wasn't available because pomegranates aren't in season. So it does seem that, like, they do follow the seasonality of the fruits, unlike America, where we're like, we'll have whatever we want whenever we want. So that was a little unique to get used to, but it was a little weird having them try to be like, no, no limes or lemons, but we got grapefruit. And it's like, well, that's it for New Year's. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So not to belabor the point, New Year's a little bit underwhelming, but outside of that, Mexico City was an incredible time. I know you had been doing some research on where to go and different food tours, and so you ended up picking the Sabores food tour, which was a food or taco specifically and mezcal tour. So love to hear about that because I mean, they knocked out the park and it was a really great experience. And we made the mistake of eating lunch at 2 p.m. before this, and then we ended up having to eat 9 tacos starting from 6 p.m. So this was a challenge.
But was it a mistake? Really? Was it really a mistake? Do you regret it?
I don't regret it, but it was painful. It was painful.
You don't regret it. You don't regret it. Okay. So with the Sabores food tour, is fantastic. First of all, I like to say if you're going to do a food tour, do it like your second day in town, not the first day, just in case you have delays or anything else and you want to be rested and hungry properly. But the reason that I had planned this early in our tour was because it connected us with fellow foodies and other mezcal enthusiasts, as well as with somebody who connected us as our tour operator from Sabores of all of the great places to go for the rest of the week. So I encourage you, if you are a foodie, book a food tour, especially with Sabores. They were fantastic. It's the highest end I've ever seen in terms of an actual food tour. It's not just a walkabout. They have like high end leather air conditioning sprinter vans. Like it's very luxurious and you're still having like the real local tacos. So it's like an amazing combination of those things. But plan that first because a lot of the places that you're going to want to go for food are going to be from other people like you. And the best place to meet other foodies is a food tour, as well as the person giving the food tour is going to give you more recommendations. So don't plan your food tour at the end of your trip. Plan it in the beginning because there's going to be places that people mention, your tour guide, people on the tour, or places that you go to that you're like, I want to come back. And you just give yourself that freedom so you can have more flexibility with where you're going to go for those good meals.
And I actually want to interject because you made a good point about going the second day. Because one thing that neither you or I knew until much closer to the trip is that Mexico City is actually at elevation. And so Denver, for here in the U.S., sits at 5,000 feet above seawater, while Denver is at 7,000. So for anyone that's traveled to Denver, Colorado before, has experienced it, your body just doesn't feel right when you go from sea level to 7,000 feet of elevation. And so it was really nice because we landed, I think maybe on a Sunday around 2ish, and we didn't really have any plans to get out for about 24 hours to give ourselves the ability to recover a little bit. So I'd highly recommend that you do the same. And so wanted to just point that out before I forgot because you reminded me of that when you said given the second day. But I really loved about the food tours. They all these restaurants, and I'm pretty sure, and even she said a lot of the restaurants in Mexico City are like that. They all have these family owned stories. They have these deep stories of how someone came from the northern part of Mexico. They knew how to make one taco really well that their family had taught them. They started making it on the side of the street, which you see so many street vendors all over the place. So I could see where this easily happens. They get a following, and this is even before social media following. So people just love their food, and eventually they say, hey, let's get a brick and mortar location. Now they actually have a location that you walk into. And there's a few places we went to. They were like, yeah, this has been around for 30, 40 years.
Longer, much longer.
Yeah, longer. Yeah. The daughter of the founder is now the person in the overalls over there that's flipping the tacos, right? It's a really, really cool experience from a food standpoint.
Yeah, it's really rich in the culture, and I like that about our tours that they gave us the personal stories about the owners of that restaurant, like how it came to be, how did they get involved, and some of them, maybe it was generational passed down, but I love the one where it wasn't and they were ready to walk away, the family who owned it, and because they were busy with another successful venture. And there was someone who worked there 30 years that says, I want to take over, and she took over and she was the one who made our tacos that day, and those were actually some of my favorite tacos of the entire day, which was our first stop. So it was really like very heartwarming to hear like these stories about family and tradition in these locations and how like the community continually supports these locations. And frankly, it's not for no reason. They're not just being supported because they've been there, it's because they are very good at what they do. And all of them do very different things. So like I'd love to give you a more in-depth, and maybe I will in another medium. But for today, there was just so many delicious tacos, traditional, modern, Michelin star. I mean, there was a whole range of the experience, but the stories were so touching and all of the tacos were fantastic.
Yeah, and for time, obviously, we can't go into all the places we stop. I do want to make two notes. One, the beauty of the food tour was that we were able to skip the line when we showed up to a place, so we could just go pretty much grab our tacos, talk about them, learn about them, the story, the history, the types of meat they are, the style, all these different things. So it was educational as well, and skip the line. That was clutch because, as Taryn mentioned, and we talked about at the very beginning of the episode, our second stop was at Califa de Leon, which earned its Michelin star last year. And to kind of blow your mind here, this is literally a street taco stand in inset in a building where there's like people selling, shirts and beanies right outside that's has a Michelin star for their tacos, and the line out the door was into the street was absolutely insane. This was even at night. So it was a fantastic experience and was elevated as well because of the fact that A, we didn't have to wait in line, and we got taken right to some of the great places.
They also brought us to an amazing mezcaleria. We had a mezcal tasting, mezcal education. I've compared so many food tours when we travel, and this one stood out a lot because we had the Michelin star experience. We had the mezcal experience in addition to just the tacos, and it was extremely efficient, well organized, safe, very well run, and probably one of the nicest Sprinter vans I've even been in. And I don't think I could say that even any of the tacos were bad. I'd just say it would be hard to pick. And it's still hard to pick my top five, top 10, even of it being there. It's just like there's a couple that were just not as good. They didn't make the cut. But that's how good the food is in Mexico City.
Speaking of which, what about our other Michelin food experiences?
Okay. Nico's was my favorite. I mean, Nico's is on the north end. It's on the outskirts of the city. And it is one of the more authentic experiences, but it's still very familial. It was in his family. The chef, who is the owner, it was his parents' restaurant, I believe, originally. We saw him and he was so cool. But Nico's was very moderately priced, very high end experience in terms of food, tableside mezcalitas, not just things that I've just not seen done and done exceptionally. So I have to say Nico's was insane, especially once I saw how little the bill cost. And again, this is a little skewed based on, I guess, our perspective of where we're from, where we live, and how much things normally cost when we go to a high end restaurant. But if I compare it to Maximo, which is the other place we went, the pricing was huge difference. Maximo was fantastic. I was so happy we got into that last minute reservation. I was stalking them every day on Open Table looking for an open lunch reservation, and one day I found one. So we went and we did the tasting menu with the wine. It was fantastic. It was significantly on the higher end of any meal we spent in Mexico by far. Not saying it wasn't worth it because it was very good. I loved the tasting. It was very well prepared. Although I will say that there are so many great restaurants, and other people told me this too before coming to Mexico City, and I kind of didn't believe them, where they were like, you don't have to go to the Michelin guide restaurants to have a great meal in this city because there's so many good places. And I did find that to be true. So I would 100% go back to Nico's. Maximo, fantastic, cool industrial vibe, farm to table. There's so many cool things about it, but I don't know that I would walk there again. I'd rather probably try somewhere new, if anything. But I think there's a lot of other things that you can find in Mexico City, and it doesn't have to be high end. And that's also why I encourage you to do a food tour early, because we met people who had already gone to some of these restaurants too. They're like, oh, yeah, we went to Pujol. It was okay. And that's a 2-star Michelin, which we didn't go to. I hear it's fantastic. I would love to go. So we should go back. Um, but you can't do all of it.
when their bookings available in 2027.
Oh my god, it was like March. They were like, "We don't have anything till March." It was insane. So, like, some of these places you have to book ahead of time and well worth it, and some of them it's kind of like, "Well, what do you want from the experience?" And I wanted good food. It didn't have to be white tablecloth, and I love that about Nikos is that it felt more casual, but it still was extremely high end. Where Maximo felt, like you were at a kind of higher end Michelin service. Not white tablecloths, so to speak, but almost. But I have to say, both of them were excellent meals. So, I mean, I didn't starve either of those days.
And if you've been following the podcast for a while, you know that Taryn and I love to frequent when we travel. We follow the list of the 50 best bars. And so this is an annual list that's put together of the 50 best bars in the world. And then they do break it up to 50 best in North America and Asia, et cetera, et cetera. There's also 50 best restaurants. And so we've been following 50 best bars. And this started a couple of years ago in our trip to Barcelona, because when we were in Barcelona, we found out that that was the same time that the number one bar that year, which was 2022, was named, which was Paradiso, which in my experience still to this day is probably one of my favorite bars I've been to in the world. Well, what's really cool is the number one bar in the world right now, until the list updates in October of this year, is in Mexico. And so there's not just number one, but the number one best bar in the world, number 20, and number 32. And we hit up all three of those.
There's actually more in Mexico City that are in the top 50. Just wanted to clear that up. Although these were the ones that, based on reviews and my algorithm of figuring out what would be a good match for us, the ones that I chose.
And I enjoyed all three of them. None of them were actually my favorite bar of the whole trip, which we'll get to in a second, but all three of them I thought were great and had some really, really cool experiences, cool drinks, good food. Highlights that you had, Taryn?
Handshake was like a really cool speakeasy. It's number one. I'm sure you guys gonna hear a lot of things if you're enthusiasts. The cocktails were great. The vibe was cool. The atmosphere was really cool. I understand why they put it there, honestly, because of the output of the cocktails. I'd say Tlacan, which is more of a like Mezcaleria kind of location, more local. There's no reservation, standing room only. That was really cool to just like have your little sipping shot of mezcal while holding a beer and figuring out how to stand and just kind of doing it how the locals do in a place that they had a really cool selection of mezcals. So I can see why it made the list because it's a very unique culturally of what it brings. And Limantor was really cool. It had a lot of interesting aspects, although I'm not sure I would put it as high up as some of the others that we've been to, although the cocktails were really good.
Another honorable mention. This ended up being the place that we went back. This only place that we actually went back multiple times. We went back there three times. Was Cafe Taco Bar. This was a place that we kind of randomly stumbled into as we were just walking through town, because again, the city and the town, this area was so walkable. We were just exploring. We popped into this place and the vibes just hit immediately, and we just kept coming back.
That was New Year's Day. Well, New Year's Eve day.
New Year's Eve day.
Because everyone else was very chill. And I was like, I will have the bisexual Paloma, please, which had mezcal and tequila. Very good.
And it was New Year's Eve day, so I had an espresso martini. And so they served you like this spicy or like popcorn with like tahini on it. But and we went back a couple more times, and each time we went back, we played Uno, one-on-one Uno. The vibes were really cool for that, and we had a dish that we ended up having twice that was probably one of my favorite single dishes, that also, I don't know, probably cost like $10 or less, that we both destroyed both times that we had it. So shout out to Cafe Taco Bar, because their vibe was really great. The staff, the owners, and the people that worked there got great advice, great tidbits, and it was good food and good drinks.
It was great mezcal too, artisanal local mezcal. And can't wait to check out your other locations in London, Paris, Tokyo, and somewhere else. But I'm about it. So big fan.
Now, what I think personally was the coolest place that we went to Mexico City, this is my opinion, Was we found another speakeasy, and Taryn was like, "Oh yeah, this place is highly rated." So we went there, and it was actually one of the few speakeasies that like legitimately was a process to get to. There was no signage for it. We talked to someone, we're like, "Oh, we're trying to go here." She's like, "Oh yeah, this is here." Up an elevator, they escort you around a corner. It's actually inside the gastronomy school there in Mexico City, so it's kind of cool. Like you're literally walking through like an empty school at night, and then you have full speakeasy vibes. Not going to ruin the whole experience, but here's the coolest thing about this place, I thought. So imagine a Rubik's cube, so a literal Rubik's cube, right? It's six sided. Each side's a different color. They show you on the menu six drinks that are the same color, so like yellow, white, blue, red, etc. And then basically they give you the Rubik's cube and say scramble it and pick the type of drink that you want, and you give the scrambled Rubik's cube to the bartender, and the bartender makes you a drink based on the 7,000 different combinations you can have with a Rubik's cube. And Taryn can tell you, I was absolutely in heaven and nerding out over these cocktail options. Absolutely loved it. There are some cons to it, which I know Taryn you're going to mention.
Yes, I'm going to say I think it's hilarious because I did all this work to make sure we went to 3 of the top 50 bars in the world. And then I found this other really cool place, and literally we went to like 6 of these places in a day. And the last place we go, which was another place I found, it was not on the 50 best bars, but it looked like a very cool speakeasy. Of course, once we get there, you order with a Rubik's Cube. I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is his favorite already." Like, I was like, all of the work I did, I could have just been like, Rubik's Cube bars or something. And that was your favorite.
Yep.
I liked the concept. It was super unique. It felt like a real speakeasy. They brought you through. You had to know the passcode, all of the things. Drinks were great. The only downside, which is again, I guess, part of the mystique, is that you can't get the same thing twice. So you can't say, I really liked that drink. Can I have another one? Which for me, devastating. For him, it's an adventure of a whole new Rubik's Cube like solution to put together and try something different. But they made like this delicious matcha passion fruit thing for me that I was just like obsessed. I was like, this is perfect. And there was no way to order it again. And that was very sad.
And if you're wondering, like, well, can't you just give them the same Rubik's Cube with the same combination? So you can, but that doesn't mean that they're going to make it the exact same way, because one bartender can infer the color scheme to be different and have different ingredients. So it's kind of made like in the moment.
Interpretive. Yeah.
Exactly. It's very interpretive. So unless you gave the very solid, unjumbled, like your whole side is white and this is the drink you're ordering, if you start putting colors in there, no guarantee you're going to be able to get the same thing twice. So I understand that being a downside, because I did have a drink as well that I was trying to get back to, but I wasn't able to. But it was still a fantastic experience and really capped off a really wonderful trip, because that was our last stop. Actually, no, we went back to Cafe Taco Bar,
Yeah, we did.
and that ended. That was our third time going back. That ended our night.
We've ended the night there a couple of times because it was just our favorite place to just wrap things up. I mean, I did. I'm sorry, I didn't. Even looking at it, I was like Cafe Taco Bar. They could have come up with a better name. Then I fell in love with the place, and I was like, okay, it's my favorite place, and let's go back. And we went back. So it was really great, but there's no shortage of great places to eat and drink in Mexico City. And I'm going to have an entire blog article about this to give more information on places that you can eat and drink and explore all of your taste buds in this amazing city.
Yeah, so look out for that blog post. So incredible time. It was a great 2 week vacation. We did fly back American Airlines. As I mentioned at the beginning, usually would pay cash. However, I mistakenly didn't realize I never booked the one way back home, and didn't realize this until probably maybe 2 to 3 weeks before our trip. And as you can imagine, that Saturday, which was January 4th, was the basically the first weekend from New Year's Eve. And so flights were $1,300 one way for economy. And I could not stomach that. I was so upset that I did not book the flights earlier, especially because the rest of the trip had basically been planned for so long. We use Tripit to map everything, and I get super analytical with our travels and our schedule and everything. I just happened to miss the return trip. So we ended up for this actually using 150,000 American Airlines miles and paid $190 in cash. And I can hear a lot of people being like, why would you spend so much American Airlines miles?
Because I had them.
Exactly. So we've talked about this on the show many times. Taryn has the Basque Bank account that's got funds in it. American, basically, we're getting somewhere between 8 to 9,000 American Airlines miles per month just because she's getting that instead of high yield in that account. And as her financial advisor, I approve. So it's all good. And so that was not our best redemption. That's gonna lower my average for the year.
But that's why we have points for when you need them, right? And that's what I want our audience to make sure that they understand is like if it's more important to you, the redemption isn't as important as the importance of the trip and whatever it is that you're looking for yourself. So you determine what the value is on that redemption. Not to say you should have a bad one, but it really is up to what's important to you. Don't let other people shame you.
And you're absolutely correct, right? It was a 1.63 cent redemption. Was not great. Better than 1.5, so I could stomach that. It was better than 1.5. Wasn't the 2 that I always go for, but was better than 1.5. But I also couldn't stomach paying $2,600 combined for a one way, one. But two, the more important thing, this was the actual perfect flight for us to get back. So it was a perfect flight, perfect time for us to get back at a reasonable time, not some insane layover or anything like that. We got back very well rested, and I was able to start the work week going back to life as a financial planner here the following week with time to relax and stuff on the Sunday before the week started. So as you said, Taryn, right, wasn't the best from a number standpoint, but it still just made sense, and I'm happy with it. One of the last things we wanted to chat about before we wrap this thing up is that we got to experience a newer lounge in the Mexico City airport. And well, Taryn, I'll let you tell them what happened.
Okay, so there's a couple of them in this airport as we were leaving. There was several different Centurion lounges. And I was looking for the international one, which seemed to have more amenities. And because we were traveling at a higher class, we're a higher status, I figured we should at least go to the better lounge with better amenities. Why not? So as we walked past a couple of the Centurion lounges, like the first one, he's like, we can go here. I'm like, we don't want that one. We passed another one. You're like, we can go here. I was like, no, that's not the one we want. We want the one over here. And then he saw one that wasn't on my map and was like, what about this one? And it was pretty close, but not at the one we were at yet. And it turns out it was a brand new Centurion lounge that is not in Google. It's not on the apps right now. And they gave us private access. Maybe because it was empty and no one knew about it. I'm not sure, probably. Or our first time, or maybe it was your business card. I mean, they gave us a lot of different reasons to think it could have happened, but they gave us access to the Black Lounge, which was incredible.
Yeah, so don't know why they did because you showed your Amex Platinum and then I showed my Amex Business Platinum because that's the one I carry. I don't carry my personal platinum on me. And we both checked in at the same time, but with two different ladies. And she basically said, "Have you been here before?" I was like, "No, we haven't." And she said, "Well, typically the Amex Platinum Lounge is like here around the corner upstairs, but will give you guys access to the true Centurion card lounge, so the black card lounge, which on its own felt much like, again, another speakeasy, the lighting, the translucent bar, like marble bar.
The velour couches.
Yeah, it was a really so first time experiencing the black card lounge in a Centurion lounge. Usually, in especially in America, a lot of the Centurion lounges they just have reserved seating for those with the black card. But this was a really really cool way to end the trip, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool getting access to this. It was so unexpected. I was just trying to get us into the best lounge, and I had already made you walk so far. And I was like, I could tell you were like, I just want to go to any of them. It doesn't matter. And I was like, no, no, I think this one will be better. But I didn't know we were going to find this one. This was before the other one, we would have even found. So it was really cool. All the food and drinks are included. You get menus, but they still bring everything. And it was a really nice way to kind of put a bow on the end of our trip.
And if you're wondering where this was like walking down the direction towards gate 1. It was somewhere around gate 8 to 10, but you had to like look right and it was like up the stairs. It wasn't in the main hallway like the rest of the lounges.
It was like a food court area by gate 8.
Yeah.
The other lounge is the international one is supposed to be by gate 10. We did not go all the way because once he saw that one, we walked in and they said it was a black lounge. I was like, well, I don't need to hear anymore. Like, we're good here.
Yeah. So before we wrap this one up, last thing I want to just make a note on from a point standpoint that I think is not really well known is that we talk often about positioning flights, especially for international travel, right? So for us, we live in Virginia and Norfolk. Our airport's super small. We usually have to fly to a DC or a New York or a Miami or Chicago, whatever it may be, and take a points trip from there to Europe or Asia. So, little known fact, Mexico City is probably one of the best places to position to because you can get some really, really great award redemptions from Mexico City to places all over the world, especially Europe, like a Spain or whatever it may be. Now, I would caveat this and say this is better served for people who the airport you're at right now flies you direct to Mexico City because you don't want to have to deal with multiple layovers or whatever it may be to get there, but it could work out in your favor. But keep in mind, if you do a positioning flight from the US to Mexico, you still have to fully go through immigrations and customs and then recheck your bag. So you're going to want a good amount of time, if not stay overnight, in order to do this. So little points and miles tip for you there. Taryn, before we wrap this one up, any other final thoughts that you had on the Mexico City time, Tulum, just the 2 weeks in general? I know I had a blast with you.
I was going to say, it was so much fun. I could talk about Mexico for another several hours, although I know we don't have that time allotted. So until next time, I'm going to keep the rest of that to myself. So I think I covered most of my highlights.
Awesome.
Okay, so if you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to follow us on all of the social media channels and sign up for our newsletter and private Facebook group as well to get insider information. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care, everybody.